Hey everybody, this is Mr. W. Our topic for today is adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. For example, 3/10 plus 2/5. When you're adding and subtracting fractions, there's three rules. The bottom number, or in other words, the denominator, must be the same. If they are not the same, that you can make them the same, and we'll show that. And then you multiply the fraction by the least common denominator, LCD, or least common denominator. Okay, first thing I like to do is that I like to rewrite the fractions and stack them. It's not a rule, but I just find that it's easier to work with that way. 3/10 and 2/5. When I check my denominator, or in other words, the bottom number, I see that 10 and 5 are not the same, and so therefore I'm not allowed to add them the way that they are. That's rule 1. Rule 2, if it's not the same, I can make them the same. And I can do that by using our least common denominator. What that means is that we're just going to use multiples. For example, multiples of 10 would be like 10, 20, 30. And there's no rule for how many you write. I just like to write a few to get started. Multiples of 5 would be 5. And when I see 10, I see that I have a common multiple, or in other words, the least common multiple. That brings us to the third rule, which is going to be to multiply. So I'm going to multiply. In this case, it's the first multiple. I'm only going to multiply by 1. Down here, I'm seeing 1, 2. In other words, 5 times 2 is equal to 10. So I'm going to multiply this fraction by 2. Okay, 3 times 1 is 3, and 10 times 1 is 10 on the top fraction. On the bottom, 2 times 2 is 4, and 5 times 2 would be 10. Notice now that on the bottom is 10 and 10, so in other words, we're good to go, and now I can add my fraction. 3 plus 4 is 7, and then the tenths remain the same. So my answer would be 7/10. When you add and subtract fractions, remember that the denominator must be the same. I want to show it with models. One way to think of it is, imagine if you have 2 apples, and I'm just writing it like a fraction, right? 2 apples and 3 oranges. So 2 apples plus 3 oranges. Well, it would not equal 5 apples because the oranges just don't magically turn into apples, and you don't have 5 oranges either. So neither of these would be correct. But what you do is you want to find something in common. Both the apple and the oranges, in this case, are fruit. So you could say that you have 5 pieces of fruit, and this would be perfectly fine. Fractions are similar. So for example, if you have 1/5 and add that to the models of 3/10, it's similar in the sense that you have apples and oranges. They're fractions, but these are fifths and these are tenths. So when we add that, our job is to make it something in common. In this case, apples and oranges were fruit. And in this case, in math, we want to find a common denominator. So 3/10, see if I can squeeze this in here. And we know that by rule that we cannot add. So we would say multiples here of 5, 10, and 10. So here's what we have in common. Just like up here, we had what in common is fruit, and here we have 10. So we would multiply, that would be rule 3. Here we go 1, 2, so we're multiplying by 2. 1 times 2 is 2, and 5 times 2 is 10. On the bottom, it's just 1, so we're multiplying by 1. And 3 times 1 is 3. And 10 times 1 is 10. And we are able to add these now. 2 plus 3 is 5, which I'm going to write over here, right? 5. And then these are 10. So what happens is that the 1/5 turned into tenths. And in this case, now we have everything in common. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths, which is showing here. Solve, add or subtract the fractions. Let's try a subtraction problem. First thing I'm going to do is to rewrite it. I just find it a little bit easier if we stack these. I just think it's a little bit easier to work. So 6/12 minus 2/6. And right away we can see that our denominator is not the same. And we said they must be the same. But we can change them. I'm going to take multiples. Well, when I see here, I know that 6, if I multiply that by 2, it would be 6/12. And you can see that I have my common or the same multiple. By the way, if you're not familiar with the least common multiple or least common denominator, just see the other lesson that we taught earlier on that. So now we're going to multiply. That would be the third rule, is that we multiply the fraction by our least common denominator. Here it's only 1. 6 times 1 is 6. 12 times 1 is 12. So we have 6/12. Here we have 1, 2. So we're going to multiply that by 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 6 times 2 is 12. And you can see that now we're good because we have 12s. 6 plus 4 would be 10. Excuse me, we're subtracting here, so let's try that again. 6 minus 4 would be 2, and then the 12 stay the same. All right, finally, 2/4 plus 1/3. I'm going to rewrite it. I think it's a little bit easier to work with. Fourths and thirds, not the same. So I'm going to do multiples. I'm going to try to write a little bit smaller. 4, 8, 12. For 3, I'm going to write here 3, 6, 9. I do not see a common multiple yet, so I'm going to add another one. 15 would be the next multiple. This would be 12, and here we go. We have our least common denominator. Our third rule is that we multiply. Here I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. And here it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 that we are multiplying by. 2 times 3 is 6. 4 times 3 is 12. On the bottom here, 1 times 4 is 4. And 3 times 4 is 12. And notice now that it's the same, so we are good to go. 6 plus 4 would be 10. And then it's going to be 12. All right, everybody, I hope this was helpful today. Remember, we're adding and subtracting fractions. Remember your 3 rules. The bottoms must be the same. If not the same, make them the same, and then multiply the fraction by your least common denominator. Okay, thanks, everybody.